The next morning, Station 9 was buzzing with talk. The story of the human who stood against a Zarn predator had already spread across every corridor, cargo bay, and hangar deck. No one knew the full details. But the rumors were enough to make people stop and whisper. "They say the human beat the predator barehanded," one miner said. "No, no," replied a pilot. "He used an ancient Terran weapon. Shocked the creature till it fell." "I heard he didn't even kill it," said another voice. "He let it live." No one knew the truth except Elias Grant, the quiet owner of the rusted comet, and the predator himself. The bar was closed that morning. The lights were dim, furniture broken, bottles shattered across the floor. Elias moved slowly through the mess, his back aching, his ribs sore from the fight. He cleaned up quietly, humming an old song from Earth. Each sound of sweeping glass echoed softly in the empty room. The bar had been his safe place for years, a corner of peace far from war and violence. But now, even that small peace had been broken. He stopped for a moment, leaning against the counter. His hand rested on the old pulse baton, now burnt and cracked from the overload. The weapon had saved his life one last time, but it wouldn't work again. He smiled faintly. "Good job, old friend," he muttered. Outside, someone knocked on the door. Elias frowned. "We're closed," he called out, but the door slid open anyway. A tall figure stepped in. Station Security Commander Lynn Vara, a slim woman with green-gray skin and sharp eyes. Her uniform was neat, her tone always calm, but everyone on Station 9 knew she was not someone to argue with. She looked around the bar, then at Elias. "Looks worse than the report said," she murmured. Elias shrugged. "You should see the other guy." Vara raised an eyebrow. "That other guy is a Zarn predator. Half the station is terrified he'll come back." Elias set his broom aside. "He might, but I don't think he will." She studied him carefully. "You're calm for someone who fought a Zarn alone." "I've seen worse," Elias said quietly. "And he wasn't fighting for fun. He was testing me. That's all." Vara sighed, rubbing her forehead. "You humans. Always so casual about danger. You're lucky you're still breathing." Elias gave a small smile. Luck had nothing to do with it. She almost smiled back, but quickly turned serious. "Listen, Elias. You've made an impression. The story is spreading fast. Other species are. Curious? Curious?" He asked. "They've always feared the Zarn, but now they've seen one fall, or nearly fall, to a single human. They're wondering if humanity is more dangerous than they thought." Elias looked down at his hands. The lines of age and scars told the story of decades spent in conflict, survival, and quiet rebuilding. "We're not dangerous," he said. "We just don't quit." Vara nodded slowly. "That's exactly what makes you dangerous." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I'll have your repair credits sent by noon. You earned them." Elias nodded in thanks. As she walked out, he whispered softly to himself, "I didn't earn anything. I just kept standing." That night, the bar reopened, despite the broken walls and cracked tables. Customers, returned miners, traders, and pilots who wanted to see the human who stood against a predator. Some came out of respect, others out of curiosity. A few came just to be near him, as if his quiet presence made them feel safe. Elias said little. He poured drinks, replaced broken chairs, and tried to act normal. But he could feel the weight of their stares, the whispered words that followed him like shadows. "That's him, the human who fought the Zarn. They say he didn't even flinch. I heard he was once part of the Terran vanguard." He didn't correct them. There was no need. As the evening went on, a soft melody played from the jukebox. The light was warm, the voices steady, and for a brief moment, it felt like peace again. Then the door opened, and the peace vanished. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Vortek, the Zarn predator himself. His armor was damaged, scorched in several places. His shoulder plating had been removed, showing deep burn marks that still glowed faintly. But he was alive and unarmed. The bar fell silent. Several customers moved for the exit, but Elias raised his hand. "Stay," he said quietly. Vortex stepped forward slowly. His voice, still deep and mechanical, was calm this time. "I came to finish what I started," crowd gasped. A few chairs scraped as people stood up. Elias didn't move. He looked at the alien for a long moment before asking, "You here to fight again?" Vortex shook his head. "No, I came to understand." That answer surprised everyone, including Elias. The Predator stepped closer, the floor creaking under his heavy boots. "When I fought you, I saw something I did not understand. You were weaker, slower, smaller. Yet you did not yield. Even when I struck you down, your eyes still burned with defiance." He paused, looking around at the others. "Your kind fights not for victory, but for purpose. That is rare." Elias leaned on the counter. "We don't fight because we want to. We fight because we must." Vortex nodded slowly. "Then perhaps your kind is not prey after all." For the first time since the battle, Elias saw something almost human in the Predator's posture. Respect. Vortex reached into a small compartment in his armor and placed a metallic emblem on the counter. It was shaped like a claw, marked with strange glowing lines. "In my culture, this means honor earned in battle. Few receive it. I offer it to you." The bar fell into complete silence. Everyone watched. Elias looked at the emblem for a long time. Then he pushed it back gently. "Keep it," he said. "You earned it too." Vortex's eyes flickered, perhaps confusion, perhaps admiration. "You refuse honor?" Elias shook his head. "No, I'm just saying we both survived. That's enough." The Predator stared at him for a few moments, then let out a sound that could only be described as a quiet chuckle. "Strange species," he said, "but worthy." Turned to leave, but stopped at the door once more. "Elias Grant of Earth," he said in his deep, echoing voice, "should you ever call for aid, the Zarn will answer." And then he was gone, the massive doors closing behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the crowd began to cheer, a deep, thunderous applause that filled the entire bar. Some banged their cups on the tables. Others shouted Elias's name. But Elias only smiled faintly and shook his head. "Don't cheer," he said. It wasn't a victory. It was understanding. Still, the story would not stop. By the next day, it would spread across the outer colonies. To other stations, and maybe even to Earth, they would say, "A Predator came hunting a human, and left respecting one." That night, long after everyone had gone, Elias sat alone at the bar. The lights were low, and the hum of the station echoed softly through the walls. He looked at the small mark the Predator's spear had left on the counter, a deep burn in the shape of a circle. He touched it gently, remembering every second of the fight, every breath, every choice. In his mind, he heard the Predator's words again. "Your kind fights not for victory, but for purpose." He smiled, looking out the window at the distant stars. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's about right." The stars outside seemed brighter that night, quiet witnesses to a small but powerful truth, in a galaxy full of fear and violence. One human had reminded everyone what it truly meant to stand your ground. By the morning after the encounter, the story of Elias Grant and the Zarn Predator had already reached the farthest corners of Station 9. Word traveled fast in the interstellar. Trade hub faster than the speed of any shuttle. Holonet's whispers among merchants. The security channels all carried the tale. A human had faced a Zarn Predator alone, and had not only survived, but had earned the Predator's respect. Elias, meanwhile, was already awake, moving quietly among the wreckage of the rusted comet. The fight had left the bar in ruins. Tables were broken, the floor was littered with glass shards. Smoke still lingered in the air from the pulse baton's overload. But Elias moved methodically, picking up the pieces, stacking bottles, and checking the power lines for damage. He had always believed in two things: preparation and calm. Today he needed both. The door slid open and Commander Linvara stepped in again. Her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "I've received messages from every docking bay in the Outer Ring," she said. "Your fight is already legendary, Elias. Aliens are talking about it. Humans are talking about it. Even some Zarn survivors are sharing details." Elias raised an eyebrow. I didn't do anything to start a legend. Vara smiled faintly. It doesn't matter. You did something that few humans could do. You survived a predator. And you survived it without killing it. That says more than brute strength ever could. Elias looked out the window at the dark expanse of space. The faint blue and green lights of the station glinting against the metal hull. It wasn't about survival, he said quietly. It was about standing. About showing that humans don't yield, even when the odds are impossible. Vara nodded. Exactly. That's what the galaxy is noticing. They're realizing humans are different. As news spread, people began coming to the rusted comet to see Elias for themselves. Traders, miners, and pilots all wanted to witness the human who had faced Azarn. Some came out of curiosity, others out of awe. A few even came out of fear. Humans were becoming a species that commanded attention across the outer rim. Elias didn't mind the attention, but he didn't seek it either. He focused on his work, repairing what he could of the bar. Every once in a while, he would glance at the empty space near the door where Vortek had stood, remembering the calm, powerful presence of the predator. For a long moment, he thought about the fight, about how close it had been, about how few people would ever understand what it meant to stand against something that could crush you without effort. And yet, he had done it. A few days later, a small delegation arrived at the station. Members of the Coalition Council, a governing body made up of representatives from several species. They came to meet Elias, curious to understand what had happened. One of them, a tall, thin alien with translucent skin that shimmered like moonlight, spoke first. You faced a Zarn predator alone? Elias nodded quietly. Yes. The alien's multiple eyes widened. And you survived? You did not surrender? You did not beg? I didn't see the point, Elias said. I faced him. I stayed standing. The other council members whispered among themselves. They had dealt with humans before, but none had seen the kind of courage Elias displayed. One of them asked cautiously, Do humans always behave like this? Elias shrugged. Some do. Some don't. But when we have to, we don't stop. That's all you need to know. The delegation spent hours asking questions, taking notes, and quietly observing Elias. They wanted to know what made humans different, why one man could face a predator and survive, why humanity, a species so small in the galaxy, could command respect from one of the most feared warriors in existence. Meanwhile, the story of Elias and Vortek began to spread across alien networks. Holofeed channels replayed holograms of the destroyed bar, animations showing the precise movements of Elias against the predator. Aliens everywhere began to rethink what they believed about humans. They're not the strongest, said one trader from the Varan Belt, but they're relentless. They fight with purpose, said another, a pilot from the Sol system, and they don't yield. They are unpredictable, whispered a young Creve merchant. That makes them dangerous. Elias did not see himself as dangerous. He saw himself as ordinary, just a man who had lived through wars, trained for combat, and learned to stay calm under pressure. But the galaxy had already assigned him a title, the human who stood against a predator, as the days passed. The Zarn predator, Vortek, returned to Station 9, not to fight, but to observe. He stood silently outside the rusted comet, watching humans and aliens alike interact with Elias. The predator had been taught that strength was measured by victory in combat. By blood spilled and by dominance, Elis had taught him otherwise. Vortek watched as Elis served drinks, repaired tables, and helped a wounded miner with a sprained ankle. He observed how the human interacted with aliens of all kinds, not with fear, not with anger, but with respect. Vortek realized that true strength wasn't measured by how hard you could hit, but by how steady you could remain when everything around you fell apart. The predator did not interfere. He simply watched, learning silently from a species he had once believed were weak. Word of Ilias's stand reached the Terran Vanguard, Earth's elite defense force. Messages came in from old comrades congratulating him. Some laughed at the idea of a single human surviving against a Zarn, while others sent warnings. Predators rarely forgot lessons. Elias replied simply, I stood. That's all. But even he knew that this night had changed things. Humanity's reputation, once limited to the Sol system and nearby colonies, was expanding. Across the galaxy, beings who had once dismissed humans as fragile were beginning to see them in a new light. Humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species. But when faced with impossible odds, humans did one thing better than any other. They endured. Back at the bar. One evening, a small group of alien children from different species came in. Wide-eyed and curious. They had heard of Elias's fight, of the Predator's respect, and they wanted to see the human hero themselves. Elias knelt down to their level, smiling gently. "Stories grow bigger than reality," he said softly. "I didn't defeat him because I was strong. I just stood when I had to." The children listened carefully, wide-eyed. "Humans are brave," one whispered. Elias shook his head. "Brave isn't the point. The point is to stand. Stand when others run. Stand when others fear. That's how we survive, not by being the strongest, but by not giving up." The children repeated his words, wide-eyed, committing them to memory. Somewhere in the galaxy, the next generation of species would remember that humans did not yield by the end of Part 4. The rusted comet had become more than a bar. It was a symbol, a place where courage, resilience, and the human spirit had been displayed for everyone to see. Aliens and humans alike came to Elias, not just to hear stories, but to learn from him. Even Vortek, the Zarn predator, had become an unspoken ally of sorts, a witness to humanity's strength. Quietly spreading word of the human who stood his ground, the galaxy was beginning to see humans differently. They were not just survivors. They were a force quiet, unyielding, and capable of standing tall in the face of fear that no other species dared challenge, and somewhere deep inside, Elias knew that the story was far from over. The night when the Predator came to the rusted comet was only the beginning, because humans stood. Weeks had passed since the night Vortek, the Zarn predator, entered the rusted comet. Station 9 had returned to its usual rhythm. Traders moved cargo. Pilots prepared for their journeys, and the low hum of machinery filled the corridors. Yet the story of that night lingered, whispered from dock to dock. And from one alien species to another, Elias Grant worked behind the bar as if nothing had happened. He repaired the tables, polished glasses, and poured drinks for travelers. The bar no longer smelled of smoke or sparks, but every scar on the walls and floor remained, subtle reminders of the night humans stood firm. Even so, something had changed. The air on Station 9 carried respect, almost reverence, for the human who had faced a predator alone. Every new face that walked into the bar glanced at Elias, curious, cautious, yet eager. Some carried the faint hope of learning how a human could endure what no other species could. One evening, as the station's artificial sunset bathed the corridor in amber light, a small group arrived, their uniforms marked with insignias from the Coalition Council. They were the same delegation that had visited days before. But now they carried something new, a message from worlds far beyond the station. And from species who had never met a human, Elias set down the drink he had been pouring. "More trouble?" he asked lightly. The tallest of the delegation stepped forward, a shimmering-skinned diplomat. "Not trouble," she said. "An invitation. You are requested to visit the Coalition Summit, not as a guest, but as a witness. Your actions have sparked interest, admiration, across many worlds." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Me? Why me?" The diplomat smiled faintly. "Because you represent something the galaxy rarely sees, courage without arrogance, strength without cruelty. Humans endure, and that endurance is changing the way others see your kind." Elias paused, considering the weight of her words. For decades, humans had been dismissed in the galaxy as fragile, unpredictable, or insignificant. Yet here he was, being asked to show the galaxy the heart of humanity. Preparations for the summit began quickly. Traders, pilots, and security teams made space for Elias and his few belongings. The pulse baton he had used that night was repaired and polished. though it was more symbolic than functional. He carried it with him, a reminder of the night humans proved their resilience. When he arrived at the Coalition Summit Hall, Lies was struck by the size and diversity of the assembly. Hundreds of species crowded the chamber, serpentine diplomats from the Orvani Belt, floating jelly-like merchants from Kelter Prime, Varan miners, Sol System pilots, and even representatives of the Zarn, including Vortek. The Predator approached slowly, his armor repaired but still showing faint scars. When his eyes met Ilias's, there was no hostility, only respect. "You called me Predator," Elias said quietly. "And you stood," Vortek replied. "That is what I remember." The room fell silent as Elias stepped forward to speak. He had never been a diplomat or a speaker. He was a man of action, of instinct, of survival. Yet now, standing before a council of galaxies, he found words flowing easily, simple, honest, and strong. "I am not a hero," he said. "I am not stronger than anyone here. I am human, and humans endure. That is what makes us capable. That is what makes us stand. Not power, not weapons, not fear, but the choice to remain standing, even when the odds are impossible." The council listened in silence. Even Vortek inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the truth of those words. "When we face challenges," Elias continued, "we do not back down. We do not flee. We fight for our friends, our home, our purpose. That is the strength I wish the galaxy to understand. Not humans alone. Any being can endure if they refuse to yield." The applause was thunderous. Some species clapped physically. Others projected pulses of light or sound in celebration. But the words had landed. The galaxy began to see humans differently. Not as weak, not as fragile, not as reckless, but as determined, resilient, and quietly unstoppable. The summit continued, and many aliens approached Elias afterward. They asked questions, sought advice, and even requested training methods. Traders wanted to learn how humans survived long-haul space conflicts. Pilots wanted to know how humans maintained focus under pressure. Young warriors from multiple species wanted to know how a human could face something like a Zarn. Predator without flinching. Elias answered carefully. "It's not about being the fastest, the strongest, or the smartest. It's about staying steady, learning your environment, using what you have, and never, ever giving up." Even Vortek lingered nearby, observing. At one point, he spoke to Elias quietly. "Your people, they are remarkable. You fight with purpose, not for blood. That is a lesson few of my kind will understand." Elias nodded. "Strength without reason is just destruction. We fight to protect, to endure, to keep standing." The Predator tilted his head. "Perhaps humans are worthy allies. Perhaps enemies as well." Elias smiled faintly. "Or maybe just survivors." Months passed. The story of the human who had stood against a predator spread farther than anyone had imagined. Holo-recordings of the rusted comet battle were shared across stations, planets, and colonies. Children in schools on remote planets watched the holograms. Listening as instructors explained what it meant to endure, Elias returned to Station 9 eventually. The bar was repaired better than ever. Alien and human customers came from across systems to hear his calm words, to witness how humans lived, and to remember the lesson of the night. A predator had entered a bar and left. Respecting a human, life had returned to a rhythm. The station thrummed with activity, merchants shouted prices, and pilots laughed over drinks. But there was an unspoken understanding. Humanity had proven something lasting. And Elias? He sat quietly at the bar, wiping a glass, his eyes on the stars outside. One evening, Vortek visited again, this time unarmed and calm. He did not come to fight. He came to observe, as he had before. "You continue to inspire," he said simply. "Not through strength, but through resolve." Elias shrugged. "I don't inspire. I endure. That's all humans ever do." Vortek inclined his head. "Endurance can inspire more than power. You're kind. The galaxy will remember you." And it was true. Years later, stories of the battle became legend. The rusted comet remained a symbol, a place where aliens and humans alike learned that courage did not require weapons or armies. Humans, small and seemingly fragile, were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to endure, to rise, to stand when all else seemed lost. Elias never claimed fame. He never sought it. He simply kept the bar open, served drinks, and taught by example. Steady hands, calm mind, and a heart willing to stand. The galaxy learned that night that humans were a species to be respected, not because they could conquer worlds alone, but because they could face impossible odds without fear, without surrender, and without losing their purpose, even Vortek. Once the feared predator of the outer systems carried the memory of that night with him. In battle, he would tell others, "A human stood against me. He did not flinch. He did not yield, and he taught me what it means to fight with purpose." For Elias, it was never about the praise or the legend. It was about what humans had always known. When everything else fails, when the odds are impossible, the one thing a human can always do is stand. And that night, in a small bar at the edge of the galaxy, humanity had stood, and the stars themselves had taken notice. The galaxy had always been divided by pride, power, and fear. Every species believed it was the greatest creation in the stars. Among them, the Zarelian Empire stood as one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations. Their cities floated on clouds of crystal, and their starships glided like silver birds across the void. For thousands of years, they had ruled their region of space without challenge until humans arrived. Humanity was still young among the stars. Compared to the Zarelians' long lives and high culture, humans were rough, emotional, and unpredictable. Many alien races looked down on them, calling them impulsive primates. Yet humanity had achieved something no one expected. They survived and thrived on worlds where others failed. They fought wars, rebuilt, and kept moving forward with stubborn hope. When the Galactic Peace Council called for a new alliance to stop border conflicts, every species sent its best diplomats. The Zarelian Queen, Sarathis, requested one special representative, Captain Elias Vorn of Earth. No one understood why. Some believed it was an insult. Others thought it was a test. Elias himself didn't know. He had served as a soldier before becoming a diplomat. He was calm, steady, known for one rare ability, the power to stay. Human no matter how alien the world around him became. When his ship descended into the bright clouds of GalacticPrime, Elias looked out the window in quiet awe. Floating towers rose like mountains of glass and light. Giant creatures with wings of energy soared between the buildings. It was the most beautiful world he had ever seen, and the most dangerous. He stepped out of his transport in a dark blue uniform with the Earth emblem on his shoulder. Thousands of alien eyes watched him. Tall Zarelians with pale skin and glowing eyes whispered among themselves. Their language was soft but sharp, like the sound of wind through glass. Elias didn't understand the words, but he knew the tone it was disbelief. The queen herself awaited him at the top of the palace steps. She was tall, graceful, and wore a crown made of silver threads that shimmered with inner light. Her gaze was cool and distant, the kind that could judge an entire world in 1 second. "Captain Elias Vorn," she said, her voice echoing through the air like music. "Humanity sends you as its face." "Yes, Your Majesty," Elias replied with a respectful bow. "I may not be the face you expected, but I'll do my best to be one you can respect." The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and said, "We will see." Inside the palace, Elias was introduced to the court. Among them was a small figure Princess Lyra, the queen's only child. She was young, no more than 10 in human years. With silver eyes like her mother's and curious energy that didn't fit the still formality of the palace, when she saw Elias, she didn't hide behind her guards like others did. She tilted her head and smiled. "You are the human," she said softly. "You look smaller than I imagined." Elias smiled politely. "I get that a lot." The court gasped at his informal tone, but Lyra giggled. That simple sound lightened the heavy air. From that day on, the princess often appeared whenever Elias attended council sessions. She watched him with fascination, how he spoke directly, how he laughed when others stayed silent, how he didn't seem afraid to disagree with anyone. Not even her mother. But not everyone in the palace shared her interest. Many Xerelians saw him as a threat to their pride. He was called the Terran Stranger behind his back. Some nobles even tried to humiliate him during meetings, questioning human intelligence, mocking Earth's small size or its history of wars. Elias never rose to anger. He answered each insult with reason and calm, often ending with a short human phrase that no translator could twist. Still, his time on GalacticPrime was not easy. The technology, the customs, even the air felt different. The Xerelians valued perfection and control, while humans thrived in chaos and heart. Elias often felt like a spark of warmth in a palace of ice. One day, during a diplomatic event aboard the royal flagship, disaster struck. The Xerelian starship Eterna was hosting delegates from 10 different species. Elias was walking beside the queen and the princess when the lights flickered. A deep rumble shook the floor. The alarms began to howl. "Energy surge in the core," shouted one of the engineers. "Containment breach in Section 5? Panic swept through the halls. Xerelian guards ran to seal bulkheads, but the energy field that powered the ship was already destabilizing. Sparks of blue lightning crawled across the walls. If the core exploded, it would destroy the entire ship and everyone on board. Elias didn't think twice. He turned to a guard and shouted, "Get the queen and the princess to the escape pods." The guard hesitated, unsure whether to obey a human. Elias didn't wait for permission. He ran toward the engineering bay, his boots echoing down the metal corridor. The air was hot, filled with the smell of ozone. Inside, the core pulsed like a beating heart of light. Cracks of energy shot from its surface. 2 engineers lay unconscious nearby. Elias grabbed an emergency shield generator and slammed it onto the control panel. Sparks burned his arm, but he didn't stop. He rerouted power from the defense grid into the containment system, manually forcing the core to cool. The room trembled. A wave of energy knocked him back, and everything went white. When he opened his eyes, the light had dimmed. The alarms were silent. He was still alive, barely. His left sleeve was torn, his arm burned, and his head throbbed. But the ship was stable. Footsteps rushed toward him. The queen appeared with her guards, her calm mask cracked with rare emotion. "You stayed?" she asked. Elias smiled weakly. Someone had to. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her daughter, who ran past the guards and knelt beside Elias. Lyra's small hands trembled as she tried to help him stand. "You saved us," she whispered. He shook his head. "I saved the ship. You're what matters." Lyra looked up at him with wide silver eyes. "Thank you, Father." The word fell softly, almost like a breath, but it struck everyone like thunder. The guards froze. The queen's eyes widened. In Xerelian culture, calling someone father was sacred. It was not a casual word. It meant a bond of life and protection. Something chosen, not born. Elias blinked, unsure what to say. He had never been called that before. He smiled gently. "You're safe now, princess. That's all that matters." But the whisper had already spread. By the time they returned to the palace, every corridor hummed with the same rumor. The air called the human father.
At night,
Elias sat alone on the balcony of his quarters. Watching the twin moons rise above the crystal city, his arm was bandaged and his uniform was torn, but his mind was clear. He thought about Earth, about how small it must look from this world. A soft voice broke the silence. "You risked your life for people who mocked you," said Queen Sarathis. She stood beside him, her eyes unreadable. Elias turned slightly. "I didn't do it for respect. I did it because it was right." "Many have said those words," the queen replied. "Few have lived them." For the first time, there was a hint of warmth in her tone. She looked toward the horizon where the sky burned with the light of distant stars. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "the galaxy has misjudged humanity." Elias didn't answer. He simply looked up at the stars, wondering what they would say if they could speak far away. On other worlds, the rumor continued to spread, a whisper that would soon shake the entire galaxy. The alien heir called a human father, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The morning after the incident aboard the royal flagship, SCIFI-Prime was full of whispers. News traveled fast in the palace. Servants, guards, and nobles all repeated the same shocking words. The heir called the human father. Every corridor, every hall echoed with the rumor. Some laughed at it, thinking it a child's mistake. Others spoke with outrage, calling it an insult to the royal bloodline. To them, humans were outsiders, short-lived, emotional, and unrefined. How could one of them be linked to the heir of the oldest empire in the galaxy? Inside her private chambers, Queen Sarathis sat in silence. 1,000 thoughts moved behind her calm eyes. Across the room, her daughter Princess Lyra stood near the window, watching the floating gardens outside. "Lyra," the queen said finally, her tone calm but firm. "You called the human father. Do you understand the meaning of that word?" Lyra turned slowly. "I do, mother. It means protection. It means love. He saved us." Sarathis studied her daughter's face. There was no fear, no confusion, only truth. "Among our kind," she said, "that word is sacred. You cannot give it lightly." "I didn't give it lightly," Lyra said softly. "I felt it." The queen looked away, her mind torn between duty and emotion. She had seen Elias Vorn's courage with her own eyes. The memory of him standing against the core's explosion still burned in her thoughts. But she also knew the court would not forgive this bond. The royal image had to remain pure, untouched by alien influence. "Very well," Sarathis said after a pause. "You will speak to him again, but only under my permission. I must understand his intentions." Lyra bowed her head respectfully. "Yes, mother." Elias, meanwhile, found himself surrounded by tension. As he walked through the palace corridors, Zarelian eyes followed him. Some were filled with curiosity, others with disgust. The human ambassador, who had once been treated with polite distance, was now treated as something dangerous. In the diplomatic hall, several nobles waited for him. One of them, Lord Kaler, a tall Zarelian with sharp features, stepped forward. "Captain Vorn," Kaler said coldly, "you have brought great confusion to our empire. The princess has spoken a forbidden word. It is your duty to correct her mistake." Elias kept his calm. "With respect, Lord Kaler, children don't make mistakes when they speak from the heart." "That human sentiment may work on your world," Kaler snapped, "but here it is weakness. The bond of father is sacred. You have polluted it." Elias looked straight at him. "I didn't ask for it, but I'll never reject a child's trust." The hall fell silent. Even Kaler had no answer for that. Later that day, Queen Sarathis summoned Elias to her private garden. The setting was peaceful floating petals, soft wind, and glowing trees that shimmered like starlight. Yet the air was heavy with unspoken meaning. The queen stood beside a crystal fountain. "Captain Vorn," she said, her voice steady, "you know what my daughter has called you? Do you understand how serious this is?" "Yes, your majesty," Elias replied, "but I didn't influence her. It came from her own heart. Do you feel the same bond?" Elias thought carefully before answering. "In my world, a father protects. He guides, even when he knows the child will someday surpass him. I don't know what the word means here, but if it means I'll protect her when needed, then yes." The queen looked at him in silence. There was no arrogance in his tonally quiet honesty. "You are a strange man, Captain Vorn," she said at last. "Most humans I have met speak with pride. You speak with purpose." He smiled faintly. "Pride breaks easily. Purpose lasts longer." For the first time, she gave a small smile in return. "Perhaps that is why Lyra sees you as more than an outsider." Days turned into weeks. Despite the court's discomfort, Elias continued his duties as ambassador. He attended council meetings, shared human strategies for defense, and worked to improve trade between Zarelians and other species. Princess Lyra often visited him in the palace library. There she asked endless questions about Earth, its oceans, its music, its people. She was fascinated by stories of humans who built cities from nothing, who survived against impossible odds. "Your people sound fragile," she once said, "yet they never stop fighting to live." Elias nodded. "That's the strange thing about humans. We fall, but we don't stay down." Lyra smiled brightly. "Then maybe that's why I feel stronger when you're near." Elias looked at her kindly. "Strength doesn't come from me, Lyra. It's already inside you. You just have to believe in it." Her eyes sparkled. That's what a father would say. He couldn't help but smile, though he knew such words were dangerous in the palace. Still, he didn't stop her. He saw in her a spark of curiosity and kindness that could change the way. Her people saw the world, but peace never lasts long in powerful places. One evening, during a diplomatic banquet, the palace came under attack. A group of rogue Zarelian officers, loyal to Lord Kaler, launched a coup attempt. They believed the Queen's alliance with humans would bring ruin to their empire. Explosions shook the lower levels of the palace. Guards shouted orders. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the halls. Elias was in the West Wing when it began. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his communication device. "Where's the Queen and the Princess?" "Trapped in the central chamber?" A guard replied. Without waiting, Elias sprinted down the marble corridors. Smoke filled the air and flashes of light tore through the palace. He passed fallen guards, helping one to safety before continuing on. When he reached the chamber doors, found 2 assassins breaking through the security field. With no weapon at hand, Elias acted on instinct. He pulled a metal pole from the damaged frame and charged. The first attacker turned, surprised by the human's speed. Elias swung the pole, disarming him, then kicked the weapon away. The second tried to strike, but Elias blocked the blow with his arm and pushed the attacker into the wall. The impact knocked him out cold. Inside the chamber, the Queen stood before her daughter, holding a glowing shield. She looked startled as Elias entered, burned and breathing hard. "Captain Vorn," she exclaimed. "You came alone?" "I couldn't wait for help," he replied. "We have to move now." He guided them through the smoke-filled corridors to a hidden exit leading to the royal hangar. Enemy soldiers closed in behind them. Lyra clung to his arm, her eyes wide but fearless. As they reached the hangar doors, an energy blast struck nearby, throwing Elias forward. He shielded Lyra with his body, taking most of the shock. Pain shot through him, but he stayed on his feet. "Keep moving," he shouted. The Queen turned and used her royal command crystal to seal the doors behind them. The remaining attackers were trapped outside. When they finally reached safety aboard a small transport, Lyra turned to him, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. "You saved us again," she whispered. Elias smiled weakly. "It's becoming a habit." Queen Sarathis looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You risked your life twice for my family." "Why?" Elias met her gaze. "Because no one else should lose family when I can prevent it." For a moment, even the proud Queen of Ziril could not speak. By dawn, the coup was crushed. Lord Kaler and his followers were arrested. But the story of the humans' bravery spread even faster than the rumors before. Many common Zarelians began to see Elias not as a threat, but as a symbol, a living example of courage without pride. Lyra refused to stay away from him. Despite her mother's warnings, she visited his quarters with a gift, a small pendant shaped like the twin moons of Zyril Prime. "This is a symbol of protection," she said softly. "As long as you wear it, our bond remains." Elias accepted it respectfully. "Thank you, Princess." "Not Princess," she whispered. "Just Lyra." He hesitated, then smiled. "Then thank you, Lyra." Later that evening, Queen Sarathis stood on her balcony watching the stars. Her advisor approached quietly. "Your Majesty," he said, "this connection between your daughter and the human, should we end it?" The Queen shook her head slowly. "No, perhaps it is time we stop fearing what is different. The galaxy may change because of this bond, but maybe that is not a curse. Maybe it is destiny." Far away, Elias looked up at the same stars. Unaware that his name was already spreading across the galaxy, not as a diplomat, but as something far more dangerous and powerful, the human father of the air.